Reactive Training Systems.
So I want to talk to you guys about stress, fatigue, and a lot of the misconceptions surrounding these topics. First, we need to start with an operational definition of fatigue or stress, and I tend to use the terms somewhat interchangeably. So hopefully this will become more clear as we continue to roll on. But the operational definition that I want to use for fatigue is something like this. It's your perceptions of the stress response due to training. Now, there's a specific way that we measure this, and we use the TRACK system to measure this. And for those that don't know, the TRACK system, TRACK stands for Training Recovery Assessment Computer, but it's our way of tracking fatigue. And it's available to anybody for free on the RTS website. You just go to reactivetrainingsystems.com, you log in, you click on apps, and you're pretty much there. So, the way that I prefer to measure fatigue is to get you to answer some subjective questions across a range of different topics. And we want you to do that. It's kind of like RPE in that we want you to take this subjective quality and be as specific and accurate with it as possible. So there are some specific definitions that go along with each question and your rating. For example, that we'll ask you about soreness in different quadrants of the body. So your soreness in your push muscles and your pull muscles and in your legs. And there are specific definitions that go along with each level. So you pick the one that's most reflective of you and move on to the next question. There's 7 questions at this time. And the way that this whole system ideally works is that you can establish a baseline. You can establish what's normal for a given lifter. And then over time, the stress response will show up as perturbations from normal. It'll be a deviation from your normal. And we can measure how big the deviation is from your normal, and we get an idea of the magnitude of that stress response. So we're looking at things like muscle soreness, joint soreness, stiffness, so those physical types of things. But we're also looking at tiredness, your overall perception of fatigue, which is kind of like that brain fog that you feel sometimes after a heavy training session. We're also looking at your motivation to train and things along those lines. So that's kind of how we define fatigue, is this accumulation of stress. If you're familiar with the water in the sink analogy, it's how much water is in the sink at any given time. So by measuring this and watching the change in fatigue, we know if you're recovering, if you're not recovering and you're accumulating fatigue, or if you're holding steady. And we can make adjustments to your training based on that knowledge. So let's start here. This is, let's not start here. Sorry. So using this definition, where I want to go with this conversation is more in the direction of what do you do with this information once you've got it? There's the measurement of fatigue, there's the measurement of your stress response, and that's TRACK, essentially. So if you see that you're accumulating fatigue, let's say, that you're gradually becoming more and more fatigued with time, that's not a situation that you're going to want to continue for the long term. Now, once fatigue gets high enough, it will become more and more difficult to push your body into more fatigue. You have lots of safety mechanisms that prevent that from happening. And I think your body ramps up the recovery processes at any rate. So there is kind of a ceiling of fatigue. You still don't want to get near that, because that's not the optimal place for you to be as an athlete in terms of your performance. Remember, it's not how much fatigue you put into your system, it's how much fatigue you recover from that matters. So you can put a lot of fatigue into the system and it doesn't count for anything unless you recover from it. And if you maintain a high level of fatigue for a long time, I strongly feel that that's going to become maladaptive at some point. If you maintain high levels of fatigue for months on end, and then you take a recovery period and allow that fatigue to dissipate, I don't think that that necessarily leads to great adaptations and improvements in your performance. There seems to be a limit to this. So my recommendation is to ensure that you're getting some recovery week to week and certainly month to month. So what I mean by that is that you should have at least 1 or 2 days each week where you feel like you're fairly well recovered, where you look at your stress markers and you say, this is pretty normal for me. I'm near complete recovery. Now, 1 or 2 days a week is not too much to ask, I don't think, and I think that is suitable for normal training periods. If you are pursuing a program that is going to have you push into high stress periods, either at the end of a block or maybe a specific block is designed to elicit a high stress response, then that's going to change, obviously. You may not get, your 1 or 2 days of complete recovery every week. But in those cases, you still want to have some periods of time, month to month, where your stress response and your fatigue is low, where things are more normal for you. You definitely want to have that month to month. I think that if you've got months of high fatigue, months of a high stress response, that's not going to work in your best favor. Now, all these are coaching observations, coaching recommendations. There is a distinction between the measurement of fatigue and what do you do about it. And that's one of the things that really bugs me when people say things like how you feel is a lie, because how you feel isn't the lie, it's the interpretation that is incorrect. So measure it, observe it, take note of how much fatigue you've got in your system, and then make a good judgment about what you should do about it. All right, that's all for this week. Thanks for watching.
Reactive Training Systems.